Content of this module. Number 1. Meaning of obligation with a period. 2. Effect of loss, deterioration, or improvement. 3. Payment before arrival of period. 4. Debtor presumed aware of period. 5. Presumption as to benefit of period. And 6. When obligation can be demanded before lapse of period. Introduction. An obligation with a period is a kind of obligation wherein its performance is subject to a term of period and can only be demandable when the period expires. Such period is a day certain which must necessarily come, although it may not be known when. Lesson discussion. Article 1193. Obligation for whose fulfillment a day certain has been fixed shall be demandable only when that day comes. Obligation with a resolutory period takes effects at once, but terminate upon arrival of the day certain. A day certain is understood to be that which must necessarily come, although it may not be known when. If the uncertainty consists it whether the day will come or not, the obligation is conditional and it shall be regulated by the rules of the preceding section. Meaning of obligation with a period. An obligation with a period is one whose effects or consequences are subjected in one way or another to the expiration or arrival of said period or term. Meaning of period or term. A period is a future and certain event upon the arrival of which the obligation subject to it either arises or is terminated. It is a day certain which must necessarily come, although it may not be known when, like the death of a person. Article 1194. Article 1194. In case of loss, deterioration, of improvement of the thing before the arrival of the day certain, the rule in Article 1189 shall be observed. Effect of loss, deterioration of or improvement before arrival of period. Payment before arrival of period. Article 1195 applies only to obligation to give. It is similar to Article 1188, paragraph 2, which allows the recovery of what has been paid by mistake before the fulfillment of a suspensive condition. The creditor cannot unjustly enrich himself of retaining the thing or money received before the arrival of the period. Debtor presumed aware of period. The presumption, however, that the debtor knew that the debt was not yet due. He has the burden of proving that he was unaware of the period, where the duration of the period depends upon the will of the debtor. Payment by him amounts, in effect, to his determination of the arrival of the period. The obligor may no longer recover the thing or money once the period has arrived, but he can recover the fruits or interest thereof from the date of premature performance to the date of maturity of the obligation. No recovery in personal obligation. Article 1195 has no application to obligation to do or not to do because as to the former, it is physically impossible to recover the service rendered, and as to the latter, as the obligor performs by not doing, he cannot, of course, recover what he has not done. Article 1196. Whenever in an obligation a period is designated, it is presumed to have been established for the benefit of both the creditor and the debtor, unless from the tenor of the same or other circumstances, it should appear that the period has been established in favor of one or of the other. Presumption as to benefit of period. In an obligation subject to a period fixed by the parties, the period is presumed to have been established for the benefit of both the creditor and debtor. This means that before the expiration of the period, the debtor may not fulfill the obligation and neither may the creditor demand its fulfillment without the consent of the other, especially if the latter will be prejudice or inconvenience thereby. The presumption, of course, is rebutable. Exception to the general rule. The tenor of the obligation or the circumstances may, however, show that it was the intention of the parties to constitute the period for the benefit of either the debtor or the creditor. The benefit of the period may be the subject of express stipulation of the parties. 1. Term is for the benefit of the debtor alone. He cannot be compelled to pay prematurely, but he can if he desired to do so. 2. Term is for the benefit of the creditor. He may demand fulfillment even before the arrival of the term, but the debtor cannot require him to accept payment before the expiration of the stipulated period. Article 1197. If the obligation does not fix a period, but from its nature and the circumstances, it can be inferred that a period was intended. The courts may fix the duration thereof. The courts shall also fix the duration of the period when it depends upon the will of the debtor. In every case, the court shall determine such period as may under the circumstances have been probably contemplated by the parties. Once fixed by the courts, the period cannot be changed by them. Court generally without power to fix a period. The period mentioned in the above provision refers to a judicial period as distinguished from the period fixed by the parties in their contract, which is known as contractual period. If the obligation does not state a period and no period is intended, the court is not authorized to fix a period. The courts have no right to make contracts for the parties. Exception to the general rule. Under Article 1197, there are two cases when the court is authorized to fix the duration of the period. Article 1197 is part and parcel of all obligation contemplated therein. Hence, whenever the court fixes the term of an obligation, it does not thereby amend or modify the same. It merely enforces or carries out the intention of the parties. It cannot arbitrarily fix a period out of thin air. Legal effect for suspensive period condition depends upon will of debtor. Number 1. The existence of the obligation is not affected although the period depends upon the sole will of the debtor. It is only the performance with respect to time that is left to the will of the debtor. Number 2. If the obligation is subject to a condition which depends upon the sole will of the debtor, the conditional obligation is void, because in such case it is actually the fulfillment of the obligation that depends upon the will of the debtor.